I stood frozen in the street as flames consumed my bakery, everything I had worked for turning to ashes before my eyes. The fire truck's sirens wailed in the background, but all I could hear was my brother Jackson's words from earlier that day. If I can't have half, then you won't have anything at all. My parents had demanded I give 50% of my business to my unemployed brother, claiming family should help family. When I refused to hand over what I had built from nothing, they took matters into their own hands. I never imagined they would destroy everything, rather than see me succeed on my own terms. As I watched firefighters battle the blaze, I knew my life would never be the same again. Growing up in Lakeside, Michigan, I was always the responsible one. My grandmother taught me to bake when I was just 8 years old. We spent countless Sundays in her kitchen, flour dusting our aprons as she shared recipes passed down for generations. "Adrian," she would say, "these recipes are more valuable than gold. Someday they'll be yours to treasure." After she passed away, those recipes became my most prized possession. After high school, I worked my way through college, graduating with a business degree. Unlike my brother Jackson, who dropped out after 3 semesters when partying became more important than studying. While I was living on ramen noodles and working 3 jobs, he was living comfortably at home with our parents covering his expenses. "You're too hard on your brother," Mom would say, whenever I mentioned his lack of responsibility. "Not everyone can be as driven as you, Adrian. You've always been independent, but Jackson needs more support." For 4 years after college, I saved every penny possible. I worked at a local bakery in the mornings, waitressed during lunch, and handled accounting for a small business at night. My social life was non-existent, but my savings account grew steadily. My parents viewed my dedication as excessive. "You need to relax more," Dad would tell me. "Life isn't just about work. Look at Jackson. He knows how to enjoy himself." What they saw as enjoying life, I saw as irresponsibility. Jackson cycled through jobs, never lasting more than a few months anywhere. He was always finding himself or exploring opportunities. Meanwhile, I was finding my way to financial independence through sheer determination. When I finally had enough for a down payment on a small storefront, I approached my parents for a loan to cover renovation costs. "A bakery?" Dad scoffed. "That's a risky business. Most restaurants fail within the first year." "This isn't just any bakery," I explained. "I have Grandma's recipes, and I've been developing my own. People love my baking." Mom shook her head. "We just don't have extra money to invest right now. Jackson needs a reliable car for job interviews." I swallowed my disappointment and approached banks instead. After 5 rejections, the 6th bank took a chance on me with a high-interest small business loan. I opened Sweet Comfort Bakery 4 years ago in downtown Lakeside. Those first months were brutal. I worked 16-hour days, handling everything myself because I couldn't afford employees. I slept on a cot in the back room many nights rather than waste time commuting. Some days, I made just enough to cover ingredients for the next day. But slowly, word spread. My signature caramel apple bread pudding brought customers back repeatedly. The local newspaper ran a small feature on my pumpkin spice cookies, and suddenly lines formed on weekend mornings. By the 18-month mark, I hired my first employee, Megan, a culinary student from the community college. 6 months later, I added 2 more staff members. We became a family of sorts, celebrating birthdays with special cakes and supporting each other through personal challenges. The bakery wasn't just my livelihood, it was my community. 3 years after opening, Sweet Comfort Bakery was finally profitable enough that I could pay myself a reasonable salary and even take Sundays off. I had regular customers who knew me by name, wedding cake orders booked 6 months in advance, and a growing catering business for corporate events. Jackson, meanwhile, had moved back home after his apartment manager evicted him for unpaid rent. My parents converted their home office into his bedroom, once again accommodating his irresponsibility. He occasionally stopped by the bakery for free coffee and pastries, always promising to pay me back someday. Last month, I received a text from my mother, asking for a family dinner that Sunday. "We need to discuss something important," she wrote. I assumed it was about Dad's upcoming retirement or perhaps Mom's recent health concerns. I arrived at their modest two-story home, carrying a freshly baked cherry pie, Mom's favorite. The tension in the air was immediately noticeable. Jackson sat smugly at the dining table, my parents flanking him like protective bodyguards. Adrian, Dad began after minimal small talk. We've been thinking about your bakery. Oh? I set my fork down, suddenly wary. It's doing well now, Mom continued. You've established yourself. It's time to think about family. I looked between them, confused. What do you mean? We think you should make Jackson a 50% partner in Sweet Comfort, Dad stated flatly. The silence that followed felt endless as I processed his words. You want me to give half my business to Jackson? I finally managed. The business I built entirely on my own? Jackson leaned forward. You've always been so selfish, Adrian. You have something successful now and you won't even help your own brother. This would give Jackson the stability he needs, Mom added. Family should help family. I stared at them in disbelief, my appetite completely gone. Do you understand what you're asking? I worked 3 jobs for years to save enough to open that bakery. I took out loans in my name. I worked myself to exhaustion. Jackson hasn't worked a steady job in years. What exactly would he contribute? Business ideas, Jackson said confidently. Marketing, bringing in a younger crowd. Your brother needs this opportunity. Dad's tone suggested this was already decided. You can afford to share now. I stood up, hands shaking. No, absolutely not. I built Sweet Comfort from nothing, with zero help from any of you. I'm not giving away half to someone who has never shown any interest in baking or business until it became successful. Mom's face hardened. I'm disappointed in you, Adrian. I thought we raised you better than this. You're choosing money over family, Dad added. As I drove home that night, tears blurred my vision. The family that had never supported my dream now felt entitled to claim half its success. I never imagined that conversation would be the beginning of the end for everything I had built. The week after that disastrous family dinner, Jackson showed up at Sweet Comfort during the morning rush. While I was busy with customers, he wandered into the kitchen, introducing himself to my employees as the new co-owner. Megan pulled me aside once the rush slowed. Is it true? Your brother is going to be running the business with you? Absolutely not, I assured her. Jackson has no role here, but the damage was already done. My staff exchanged worried glances, suddenly concerned about their job security. I called an emergency meeting that afternoon to clarify that no ownership changes were happening. My brother is not now, nor will he be, an owner or manager of Sweet Comfort, I stated firmly. The relief on their faces was palpable, but Jackson's visit had planted seeds of uncertainty. Later that week, I received a call from my friend Tara, who managed a local coffee shop. Are you having financial problems? She asked without preamble. No. Business is better than ever. Why? Your brother was in here telling everyone that Sweet Comfort is struggling, and that's why you're resisting bringing him on as a partner. He said you're too proud to admit you need help. My stomach knotted with rage. None of that is true. I figured as much, Tara replied. But he's telling anyone who'll listen. The situation escalated when I discovered Jackson had approached my flour supplier, introducing himself as my business partner and attempting to change our standing order. Thankfully, the supplier called to verify before making changes. I confronted my brother by phone that evening. Stop interfering with my business, Jackson. You are not my partner, and you have no right to contact my suppliers. I'm just trying to help, he replied, his voice dripping with fake innocence. That's what family does. If you set foot in my bakery again, or contact any of my vendors, I'll file for a restraining order. The next day, I received notice from the health department about an anonymous complaint regarding unsanitary conditions at Sweet Comfort. The subsequent inspection found no violations, but it disrupted an entire day of business and stressed my entire staff. 2 days later, my regular egg supplier called to confirm the cancellation of my standing order. I never canceled it, I told him. "We received a call yesterday from someone claiming to be your office manager," he explained. I had to scramble to place a new order, paying premium pricing for rush delivery to avoid shorting our production schedule. That same week, 3 wedding cake consultations canceled without explanation. When I called one couple to reschedule, the bride reluctantly admitted someone had called them, claiming to be from Sweet Comfort, saying we could no longer accommodate their date. The pattern was becoming clear. Someone was actively sabotaging my business. Given the timing and nature of the interference, I had little doubt who was responsible. I called my parents, hoping they might rein in Jackson's behavior. "You're being paranoid," Mom dismissed. "Jackson would never do such things." "If you're having business problems," Dad added, "perhaps you should reconsider our suggestion." Their response made one thing crystal clear. They were either encouraging Jackson's behavior or willfully ignoring it. Against my staff's advice that I was overreacting, I invested in a comprehensive security system for the bakery, including cameras covering both the interior and exterior. The expense strained my budget, but peace of mind was worth the cost. 2 weeks after installing the system, I arrived at work before dawn to find the back door lock damaged. Nothing was missing inside, but someone had clearly attempted to break in. The security footage showed Jackson and my father outside the bakery at 2 in the morning, with Jackson clearly working on the lock while my father kept watch. I took the footage to the police station, but the officer who viewed it seemed hesitant. "Family disputes are complicated," he said. "They didn't actually break in, and there's no damage to your property. Have you tried talking to them?" His dismissive attitude left me feeling vulnerable and unprotected. The next morning, an unmarked envelope was waiting on the bakery's front step when I arrived. Inside was a crudely printed note. "Reconsider the partnership before things get worse. Family businesses should benefit all family members." The threat was unmistakable. I placed the note in a plastic bag, hoping the police might take it more seriously than the video footage, but I never made it to the station. What happened next changed everything. The call came at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. I had been asleep for barely an hour after a long day of baking when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Miss Wilson? This is Lakeside Security Monitoring. The alarm at Sweet Comfort Bakery has been triggered. The police have been dispatched, but you should know we're also detecting what appears to be a fire alarm." I threw on clothes and raced to my car, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. As I approached downtown, I could see the orange glow in the sky and smell smoke from blocks away. By the time I parked haphazardly across the street, 3 fire trucks were already on scene. Hoses deployed as firefighters battled the blaze consuming my bakery. I stood on the sidewalk, unable to move closer, unable to look away. Through the front windows, I could see flames devouring the vintage display cases I had lovingly restored. The hand-painted sign my first employee had created as a 1-year anniversary gift was already gone, leaving only a charred outline on the brick facade. A police officer approached me. "Are you the owner?" I nodded numbly. "The fire chief will want to speak with you when they get the blaze under control. Do you know of anyone who might have reason to target your business?" Before I could answer, I spotted my security company representative hurrying toward us. "Miss Wilson, I've saved the security footage from tonight. The system uploaded to our cloud storage until the connection was lost due to the fire." Within minutes, we were watching the footage on his tablet. The timestamp showed 2:15 a.m. 2 figures approached the back door, their faces partially obscured by hoods but still recognizable to me. Jackson and my father, again. This time they succeeded in breaking the lock. They entered carrying gas cans, and 10 minutes later, rushed out. Shortly afterward, the first flames became visible in the camera view. "I know them," I told the officer, my voice shaking. "That's my brother and my father." The officer looked uncomfortable. "Are you certain? Family accusations are serious matters." "Play it again," I insisted, pointing at the screen as the figures moved. "That's my brother's distinctive walk, and you can see my father's limp from his knee surgery." He took down the information but seemed skeptical. "We'll need the fire investigation to determine the cause, before we can pursue arson charges. Sometimes electrical issues can cause fires that look intentional. By morning, Sweet Comfort was a blackened shell. The firefighters had prevented the flames from spreading to neighboring businesses, but my bakery was completely destroyed. Everything was gone. My equipment, my recipe books, including grandmother's irreplaceable handwritten collection, customer records, and 6 wedding cakes due that weekend. The insurance company sent an investigator the following day, a stern woman who asked pointed questions about my financial situation. Business was struggling? She asked, tapping her pen against her notepad. No, we were more successful than ever. I can provide bank statements to prove it. Any large debts or cash flow problems? None. We've been profitable for over a year. She looked at me with thinly veiled suspicion. You realize we investigate all potential fraud cases thoroughly. Business owners sometimes see insurance payouts as solutions to financial difficulties. I was being accused of burning down my own livelihood for insurance money. The irony was almost unbearable. 2 days later, a small article appeared in the Lakeside Chronicle with the headline, "Local Bakery Fire Raises Questions." The piece implied the fire's timing was suspicious given rumors of financial difficulties, and mentioned the insurance investigation prominently. There was no mention of the security footage, or my family's potential involvement. I later learned Jackson had been drinking at a local bar the night before, telling anyone who would listen that I had promised him partnership in the bakery but reneged when he asked for his share. According to him, I'd said I would rather see it burn than share with family. The community began to divide. Longtime customers expressed sympathy and asked how they could help, but others looked at me with suspicion. Parents I'd known from PTA meetings crossed the street to avoid talking to me. My reputation, which I'd built as carefully as my business, was being systematically destroyed. When the fire marshal officially determined the cause as arson due to the presence of accelerant throughout the building, I thought surely the police would act on the security footage. Instead, I received a call from Detective Barnes. "Miss Wilson, we've interviewed your brother and father about their presence at your bakery the night of the fire." "And?" I prompted when he paused. "They claim they were checking on the bakery because they were concerned about your state of mind. According to them, you've been under significant stress and making accusations against family members. They deny any involvement in setting the fire." "That's absurd. The footage clearly shows them carrying gas cans inside." "The footage quality isn't as conclusive as you believe," Barnes replied. "Without additional evidence, the prosecutor is reluctant to pursue charges against family members in what appears to be a private dispute." I hung up, stunned by the realization that my family might escape consequences for destroying my livelihood. Later that day, I overheard 2 former regular customers talking at the grocery store. "I heard she offered the bakery to her brother, but then changed her mind," one said. "The poor guy quit his job expecting to have the partnership." "My cousin works at the bank," the other replied. "She says the bakery was underwater financially, easier to collect insurance than admit failure." The lies were spreading faster than the truth could catch up. Worst of all, the insurance company was delaying payment due to the ongoing arson investigation, leaving me without income to restart my business or even pay my apartment rent. I sat alone in my apartment that night, surrounded by the few mementos I'd kept at home rather than the bakery. Photos of the grand opening, Grandma's rolling pin, and the first dollar I'd earned. Everything else was gone, reduced to ashes by the people who should have supported me most. For the first time since opening Sweet Comfort, I felt truly defeated. 2 weeks after the fire, I lost my apartment. Without income from the bakery and with the insurance company still investigating, I couldn't make rent. My landlord was sympathetic, but unwilling to wait indefinitely for payment. "I'm sorry, Adrian," he said as I handed over my keys. "If your situation improves, let me know. You've always been a good tenant." I moved into my friend Tara's spare bedroom, bringing only 2 suitcases of clothes and my few remaining bakery mementos. The humiliation of my circumstances weighed heavily, but Tara never made me feel like a burden. "You'd do the same for me," she insisted when I tried to thank her. "This is temporary. You'll rebuild." But how? Without insurance money or savings, Rebuilding seemed impossible. My employees had scattered, finding other jobs out of necessity. Megan texted that she was behind on rent and facing possible eviction. The guilt of their suffering because of my family's actions crushed me further. Depression settled over me like a heavy blanket. I spent days barely leaving Tara's guest room, ignoring calls from well-meaning friends. The bakery had been more than my livelihood. It had been my identity, my purpose. Without it, I felt hollow. Enough, Tara declared after finding me still in pajamas at 3 in the afternoon. Get dressed. We're going out. She dragged me to her car, refusing to tell me our destination until we pulled up outside a small law office downtown. Patricia Winters, Tara explained. She's tough as nails and specializes in family business disputes, and she's expecting us. Patricia was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who listened without interruption, as I explained everything that had happened. Your family destroyed your business because you wouldn't give your brother half? She clarified, her expression incredulous. Yes, and now they're spreading lies that I promised him partnership and that I was failing financially. Patricia leaned forward. Do you have copies of that security footage? I nodded. The security company saved it to their cloud before the system was destroyed. Good. What about financial records proving the business was solvent? My accountant has everything. Tax returns, profit and loss statements, bank records. She made notes, then looked up with steely determination. Adrian, what your family did wasn't just wrong. It was criminal. Arson, defamation, business interference. The police may be reluctant to pursue criminal charges in a family matter, but we can file a civil lawsuit for damages. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Can we win? Nothing's certain in court, but you have evidence on your side. The real question is, are you prepared to publicly sue your own family? Once we file, there's no going back. I thought about my grandmother's recipes, turned to ash. The employees who lost their jobs, the customers who trusted me to be part of their weddings and celebrations. My own future, nearly destroyed by the people who should have supported me most. Yes, I said firmly, I'm ready. Patricia began gathering evidence immediately. Beyond the security footage and financial records, she interviewed my employees about Jackson's false claims of partnership and the subsequent harassment. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One morning, I was at the local farmer's market helping Tara sell coffee when an elderly man approached our stand. You're Adrian Wilson, he stated rather than asked. From Sweet Comfort Bakery. I tensed, expecting more accusations. Yes, that's me, he extended his hand. Walter Simmons. I was a regular. Your caramel apple bread pudding got me through my wife's passing last year. My eyes welled up at the reminder of my signature dish. I'm a retired judge, he continued, and I don't believe for 1 second you burned down your own bakery. Walter became an unexpected ally. Though no longer on the bench, his connections in the legal community opened doors. He introduced Patricia to a forensic accountant who specialized in arson investigations and an expert on family business disputes. Through their network, we discovered something disturbing. Jackson had a history of destructive behavior when denied what he wanted. 3 years ago, a restaurant had fired him after 2 weeks for repeated tardiness. A week later, their storage shed mysteriously burned down. A year before that, he'd been rejected for an apartment, and the building's laundry room was vandalized the same night. No charges were ever filed, because my parents quietly paid for damages, protecting Jackson from consequences. They've enabled his behavior for years, Patricia concluded, after reviewing the evidence. And now, they've participated in it directly. Meanwhile, my parents launched a counter-narrative. They told extended family and community members I had verbally promised Jackson partnership in the bakery, but reneged when it became successful. According to them, I had become money-obsessed and forgotten the importance of family. The strain took its toll. I lost weight, developed insomnia, and jumped at unexpected sounds. Tara worried constantly, often finding me awake at 3 a.m., staring blankly at the wall. "You need to see someone," she urged, setting a counselor's business card on the table. "This is too much to handle alone." She was right. The counselor helped me process not just the fire, but years of family dynamics that had led to this point. The pattern became clear. My achievements were downplayed, while Jackson's failures were excused. I had internalized the message that my success made me selfish if I didn't share it, regardless of who had done the work. 4 months after the fire, Patricia filed our lawsuit seeking damages for the destruction of Sweet Comfort Bakery, lost income, defamation, and emotional distress. The complaint named my parents and Jackson as co-defendants, with detailed evidence of their actions leading up to and including the arson. My parents' response was swift and vicious. They filed a countersuit claiming I had breached a verbal agreement to make Jackson a partner. They sought 50% of the insurance payout, still pending, and damages for emotional distress caused by betrayal of family trust. Their attorney arranged a meeting, ostensibly to discuss settlement. Patricia advised against it, but I wanted to look them in the eye one more time before committing to the legal battle ahead. The conference room felt arctic as my parents and Jackson sat across from me, flanked by their attorney. Mom looked thinner, with new lines around her mouth. Dad avoided eye contact entirely. Jackson slouched in his chair, radiating resentment. "This lawsuit is tearing the family apart," their attorney began smoothly. "Surely there's a way to resolve this privately." "Like burning down my bakery privately?" I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "Allegations without proof," he dismissed. "We're prepared to offer a compromise. Withdraw your lawsuit, and your parents will withdraw their countersuit. Everyone walks away clean." Patricia's laugh was sharp. "Clean?" "My client lost her livelihood, her home, and her reputation. Your clients are on video committing arson. There will be no walking away." "Videos can be misinterpreted," he countered. "And family promises carry moral weight, even without written contracts." I studied my family's faces, searching for any sign of remorse. There was none. "I have nothing more to say to them," I told Patricia, standing to leave. As we reached the door, Jackson spoke for the first time. "You were always selfish, Adrian. All you had to do was share." I turned back slowly. I worked 16-hour days for years, building something from nothing. What exactly did you do to deserve half? The silence that followed was answer enough. That evening, Detective Barnes called with news that shifted the case dramatically. During routine questioning, my father had made a damning admission. He acknowledged being at the bakery the night of the fire, but claimed they only meant to cause enough damage to make the insurance claim difficult, not destroy the entire building. "It doesn't matter what they intended," Patricia explained when I called her. "Once they deliberately set the fire, they're responsible for all resulting damage." And that admission corroborates the security footage. For the first time, criminal charges seemed possible, but the most shocking revelation was yet to come. The day before our preliminary hearing, Patricia received an anonymous envelope. Inside was documentation of a life insurance policy my parents had taken out on me just 2 months before the fire. The policy, for $500,000, named them as sole beneficiaries. "This changes everything," Patricia said grimly. "We're taking this to the police and the prosecutor immediately." When confronted with the policy documentation, Detective Barnes finally took the case seriously. My parents claimed the policy was standard family financial planning, but combined with the arson evidence, it painted a disturbing picture. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following week. As I prepared to face my family in court, I received a text from an unknown number. "Jackson has always burned what he can't have. Ask about the Carson Diner kitchen fire in 2018. The message led to our most important discovery yet. After being fired from the Carson Diner, Jackson had threatened the owner. A week later, a kitchen fire caused $200,000 in damage. No charges were filed, but an insurance investigator had documented suspicious circumstances similar to the bakery fire. Patricia located the investigator, now retired. who revealed my parents had quietly paid a settlement to prevent a criminal investigation. It was the third such incident he knew of personally. "Your brother has a pattern," Patricia told me, "and your parents have a pattern of covering for him. The court needs to know this isn't an isolated incident." As we prepared for trial, something unexpected happened. The community began to rally behind me. Former customers started a GoFundMe for rebuilding. Local business owners, who had initially believed my family's version, heard about the mounting evidence and publicly expressed support. 3 competing bakeries offered temporary kitchen space so I could fulfill outstanding wedding cake orders. The tide was turning, but the most powerful revelation was still to come at trial. The courthouse loomed before me on the first day of trial, its stone facade imposing against the clear blue October sky. 6 months had passed since the fire, but the pain felt fresh as I climbed the steps beside Patricia. "Remember," she said quietly, "this isn't just about punishment. It's about reclaiming your future." My parents and Jackson arrived with their attorney moments later, studiously avoiding eye contact as we filed into the courtroom. The small gallery was surprisingly full, with former customers, employees, and even a few reporters from local papers. Judge Eleanor Martin entered, a stern-faced woman in her 60s with piercing eyes that surveyed the courtroom carefully. After preliminary statements, Patricia called her first witness, me. Taking the stand felt surreal. Under Patricia's guidance, I recounted my journey from working multiple jobs to save for the bakery, through the years of building the business, to the fateful family dinner, where my parents demanded I give Jackson half. "And prior to that dinner, had your brother ever expressed interest in baking or running a business?" Patricia asked. "Never. He visited occasionally for free pastries, but he'd never even offered to help during busy periods." When Patricia played the security footage of Jackson and my father entering the bakery with gas cans, murmurs spread through the courtroom. My mother stared at her lap, while my father's face reddened. The defense attorney's cross-examination was aggressive, suggesting I had promised Jackson partnership verbally and reneged once successful. "Isn't it true you've always been jealous of your parents' attention toward your brother?" he pressed. Patricia objected, and Judge Martin sustained, instructing him to stick to relevant questions. Over the next 3 days, a parade of witnesses strengthened our case. My former employees described Jackson's harassment and false claims of partnership. The security company representative confirmed the authenticity of the footage. My accountant presented financial records proving Sweet Comfort's growing success, debunking claims of financial desperation. The most powerful testimony came from Jackson's ex-girlfriend, Alicia. She described witnessing Jackson destroy personal property during arguments and recounted his bragging about making people pay when they crossed him. He specifically mentioned the bakery, Patricia clarified. "Yes," Alicia confirmed. "After the family dinner where Adrian refused to make him partner, he told me she'd learn what happens when you don't share with family." My parents' testimony was a study in contradiction. They admitted demanding I give Jackson half the business but denied any involvement in harassment or property destruction. When presented with the security footage, they claimed they were checking on the bakery because they were concerned about my mental state. "And the gas cans clearly visible in your hands?" Patricia pressed. "For the emergency generator," my father claimed, though Sweet Comfort had no such equipment. Jackson's testimony proved even more damaging to their case. Under pressure, he contradicted his parents' version of events multiple times and became combative when Patricia mentioned the previous incidents at other businesses. "You can't prove anything," he snapped, prompting Judge Martin to admonish him. The forensic accountant Patricia had hired presented a detailed analysis comparing the Sweet Comfort fire to 3 other suspicious fires connected to Jackson, noting remarkable similarities in method and timing relative to perceived slights. The insurance investigator testified about the settlement my parents had paid after the Carson Diner fire, revealing they had a pattern of covering up Jackson's destructive behavior with financial payoffs. As the trial entered its second week, I began to feel cautiously optimistic. The evidence against my family was mounting, and even their attorneys seemed less confident. Then came the moment that changed everything. On Wednesday morning, Judge Martin called both attorneys to the bench for a lengthy discussion. When they returned to their tables, both looked stunned. The judge addressed the courtroom directly. Before we continue, I must disclose something. Last night, reviewing case details, I realized a connection I should have identified earlier. 3 years ago, my daughter Emily worked at the Carson Diner when it experienced a fire similar to the one in this case. The defendant, Jackson Wilson, was an employee who had been terminated shortly before the incident. A shocked murmur ran through the courtroom. My parents whispered frantically to their attorney. While this connection would typically require my recusal, Judge Martin continued, after consultation with the Judicial Ethics Committee, I am disclosing it transparently. The committee noted that this case represents the fourth similar incident across 3 different counties, creating a pattern that any assigned judge should be aware of. If either party objects to my continued presiding, I will recuse myself. After a hurried conference, my parents' attorney stood. Your Honor, we request your recusal and move for a mistrial. Patricia rose calmly. Your Honor, we appreciate your transparency and have no objection to your continued presiding. The pattern of behavior is precisely what this case aims to address, regardless of which judge hears it. Judge Martin nodded. Motion for recusal granted. However, the motion for mistrial is denied. This case will be reassigned, but all evidence and testimony already presented will stand. As we gathered our materials to leave, I felt a mix of frustration and vindication. The judge's revelation confirmed what we had been arguing. Jackson's behavior followed a pattern, with my parents consistently covering for him. That afternoon, we learned Judge Samuel Washington would take over the case. Known for his no-nonsense approach, he scheduled resumption for the following morning, allowing no delays. When court reconvened, Judge Washington made it clear he had thoroughly reviewed all previous testimony and evidence. This court will not tolerate further attempts to obscure the truth, he stated firmly. Let's proceed. Patricia called her final witness, Detective Barnes. Initially reluctant to get involved, the mounting evidence had changed his perspective. He testified about my father's damning admission regarding their presence at the bakery the night of the fire. The revelation of the life insurance policy my parents had taken out on me shortly before the fire struck like a thunderbolt. Even Judge Washington, typically impassive, looked disturbed as the documentation was entered into evidence. To be clear, Patricia asked, the defendants took out a substantial life insurance policy on their daughter just weeks before her business was destroyed by arson? That is correct, Barnes confirmed. During cross-examination, my parents' attorney tried to characterize the policy as routine financial planning, but the timing was impossible to explain away. In a desperate attempt to salvage their case, my parents' attorney called my father back to the stand. Under questioning, he maintained they never intended to completely destroy the bakery. We just wanted to teach Adrian about family loyalty, he insisted. The fire wasn't supposed to spread so quickly. Judge Washington leaned forward. Mr. Wilson, are you admitting to intentionally setting the fire? My father looked trapped. After conferring quietly with his attorney, he answered, Yes, Your Honor. But we only meant to cause minor damage, not burn down the entire building. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Patricia squeezed my hand under the table. This admission changed everything. Did your son Jackson participate in setting this fire? Judge Washington pressed. My father hesitated, looking at Jackson, who stared back with cold fury. Yes, he finally admitted. We both did. My mother began to cry quietly. My father looked defeated. Jackson sat rigid with anger, his hands clenched into fists. In her closing argument, Patricia laid out our case methodically. The pattern of destructive behavior, the systematic harassment of my business, the arson captured on video, and now, my father's admission of guilt. This isn't just about a building that burned down, she concluded. It's about a systematic campaign to destroy everything Adrian Wilson built because she refused to reward her brother's lifelong pattern of irresponsibility. The defendants must be held accountable, not just for her sake, but to finally end the cycle of destruction they've enabled for years. My parents' attorney's closing argument felt hollow after my father's admission. He focused on family dynamics and miscommunication, suggesting that while their actions were wrong, they stemmed from misguided love rather than malice. As Judge Washington adjourned to consider his verdict, Patricia warned me not to get my hopes up. Civil cases can be unpredictable, especially with family involved. But I felt something I hadn't experienced since the night of the fire, a sense that justice might actually be possible. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Washington returned with his decision 3 days later. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. Patricia sat beside me, her expression carefully neutral, but I felt her tension matching my own. My parents and Jackson sat at the defendant's table, their postures reflecting their different approaches to this moment. Mom seemed to have aged years in the past week, her shoulders curled inward. Dad stared straight ahead, jaw set in stubborn defiance. Jackson slouched in his chair, affecting indifference, but his constantly tapping foot betrayed his anxiety. In the matter of Wilson versus Wilson, Judge Washington began, his deep voice commanding complete attention. I have reviewed all evidence and testimony presented in this case. What emerges is a disturbing pattern of behavior that cannot be excused or minimized. He shuffled his papers, taking a moment before continuing. The defendants in this case destroyed a legitimate business out of entitlement and spite. They engaged in a systematic campaign of harassment and sabotage, culminating in arson. When confronted with their actions, they attempted to smear the plaintiff's reputation rather than accept responsibility. My mother began crying softly. My father placed his hand over hers, but his expression remained stony. Perhaps most disturbing, Judge Washington continued, is the evidence of a long-standing pattern of enabling destructive behavior. The testimony regarding previous incidents at the Carson Diner and other establishments reveals this was not an isolated event, but the culmination of years of similar actions that went unpunished. He looked directly at my parents. By repeatedly shielding the defendant Jackson Wilson from the consequences of his actions, you not only failed him as parents, but endangered the community. This court cannot ignore the escalating nature of these incidents, nor the life insurance policy taken out shortly before the fire, which raises serious questions about intent. Judge Washington then addressed the countersuit. The defendant's claim of a breached verbal agreement is wholly without merit. No evidence supports the existence of such an agreement. This appears to be a cynical attempt to justify inexcusable criminal behavior. He picked up another document. As to damages, the court finds the defendants jointly and severally liable for the following. First, the full replacement cost of Sweet Comfort Bakery and all its contents, totaling $627,000. Second, lost income during the period of rebuilding, calculated at $34,000 per month for an estimated 8 months. Third, compensation for defamation and emotional distress in the amount of $150,000. Finally, punitive damages of $300,000, reflecting the deliberate and malicious nature of the defendant's actions. I gasped audibly. The total exceeded $1 million. Furthermore, the judge continued. The court orders the defendants to issue a public retraction of all false statements regarding the plaintiff and her business. The court also orders defendant Jackson Wilson to undergo psychiatric evaluation and comply with any treatment recommendations as a condition of the settlement. He paused, looking at each defendant in turn. Let me be clear. This ruling is not about punishing family disloyalty, as the defendants have characterized it. It is about holding individuals accountable for criminal actions that destroyed a legitimate business and nearly ruined an innocent person's life. The fact that those individuals were family makes their actions more reprehensible, not less. Judge Washington then did something unexpected. He set aside his papers and spoke more personally. Miss Wilson, no court ruling can fully restore what you've lost. Beyond the physical business, you've experienced a profound breach of trust from those who should have supported your success. The court recognizes this loss and hopes this judgment provides some measure of justice and the means to rebuild. Turning back to my family, his expression hardened. Defendants, I strongly urge you to reflect on the choices that brought you here today. This judgment is severe, but proportionate to your actions. The court sincerely hopes it represents a turning point in your understanding of responsibility and consequences. With that, he gavelled the proceeding closed. In the hallway afterward, reporters approached for comments. Patricia fielded most questions while I stood in stunned silence, the reality of our victory slowly sinking in. How will your clients pay such a substantial judgment? Someone asked my parents' attorney. We're reviewing our options, he replied tightly before hurrying them away. Later, Patricia explained the practical implications of the ruling. My parents would likely need to sell their home to satisfy the judgment. The insurance company, now with a definitive court ruling on the arson, would finally process my claim. Most importantly, the public vindication would help restore my reputation in the community. That evening, local and regional news covered the verdict. Headlines declared justice for bakery owner and family arson plot ends in million-dollar judgment. One reporter interviewed Walter Simmons, who expressed satisfaction with the outcome. I've seen many cases during my years on the bench, he told the camera, but few as clear-cut as this one. The community lost a treasured business because of entitlement and spite. Today's ruling sends a powerful message that such behavior carries serious consequences. The most surprising reaction came from my extended family. Aunts, uncles, and cousins, who had remained silent throughout the ordeal, began reaching out with messages of support. Several admitted they had believed my parents' version initially, but were horrified by the evidence presented at trial. We should have known better, my Aunt Susan wrote. You've always been the responsible one. I'm so sorry we didn't stand by you. Their support, while welcome, also highlighted how isolated I had been during the darkest moments. Only Tara, Walter, and a handful of loyal customers had stood by me when everyone else believed the worst. 2 days after the verdict, I received an unexpected call from Detective Barnes. Miss Wilson, I wanted to inform you personally that the district attorney has decided to file criminal charges against your brother and father for arson, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. Your mother is being charged as an accessory after the fact. Will they go to prison? I asked, unsure how to feel about that possibility. That's up to the criminal court, but given the evidence and your father's admission, jail time is likely for both men. Your mother might receive probation if she cooperates. I thanked him and sat quietly after hanging up, processing this new development. The civil judgment had given me the means to rebuild, but criminal charges meant my family would face public consequences beyond financial penalties. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part mourned the finality of this rupture. Whatever relationship we might have salvaged after the civil case seemed impossible now. That night, I confessed these mixed feelings to Tara. It's normal to feel conflicted, she assured me. They're still your family, despite everything. But remember, they made choices that led to these consequences. You didn't put them in this position. She was right, of course. My parents and Jackson had chosen their path, prioritizing his entitlement over my hard work, family loyalty over basic decency. Still, as I fell asleep that night, I wondered if there would ever be a way forward that included some form of reconciliation. The judge's words about turning points echoed in my mind as I drifted off, uncertain about the future, but, for the first time in months, hopeful about my own path forward. 1 year after the fire that destroyed Sweet Comfort Bakery, I stood in the sunshine before a new building, twice the size of the original, with a gleaming sign proclaiming Sweet Resilience Bakery and Cafe. The grand reopening had drawn a crowd that wrapped around the block, with former customers and new faces alike, eager to sample what local media had dubbed the comeback story of the year. The journey to this moment had been arduous, but transformative. After the trial concluded with both civil judgment and criminal charges against my family, my life entered a phase of rebuilding that tested my strength in unexpected ways. My parents sold their home to satisfy the civil judgment, moving into a small apartment across town. My father and Jackson both accepted plea deals in the criminal case, with my father receiving 18 months in county jail and Jackson sentenced to 2 years plus mandatory psychiatric treatment. My mother received probation and community service as an accessory. The insurance company finally processed my claim after the court ruling, providing funds that, combined with the civil judgment, allowed me to purchase a larger property on Main Street. The new location offered better visibility and enough space for both the bakery and a cafe area, where customers could linger over coffee and pastries. Rebuilding wasn't just about physical space. The most challenging task was recreating my grandmother's recipes from memory. For weeks, I experimented in Tara's kitchen, trying to recapture the precise balance of spices in her apple bread pudding or the perfect texture of her pie crust. Some attempts failed miserably, but each brought me closer to the originals. In the process, I discovered new variations that became signatures of sweet resilience. The community support proved overwhelming. A successful GoFundMe campaign provided additional capital for state-of-the-art equipment. Former competitors offered temporary kitchen space so I could fulfill outstanding orders while construction progressed. Local suppliers extended credit terms to help with cash flow. Most touchingly, dozens of former customers brought handwritten copies of recipes they'd requested in the past, helping me reconstruct my recipe collection. As renovation began on the new space, I faced another decision: what to do with a portion of the civil judgment specifically designated for emotional distress. After considerable reflection, I established the Sweet Resilience Foundation, dedicated to helping small business owners recover from disasters, whether natural or man-made. The foundation offered emergency grants, business counseling, and legal assistance to entrepreneurs facing catastrophic setbacks. The first recipient was Megan, my former employee who had struggled financially after losing her job. With foundation support, she completed culinary school and joined Sweet Resilience as assistant manager and head baker for wedding cakes. 3 months before the grand reopening, I received an unexpected letter from the correctional facility housing my father. His handwriting, once bold and assertive, appeared shaky and uncertain. "Adrian," he wrote, "there are no words adequate to express my remorse for what we did to you. For years, I convinced myself that protecting Jackson was my primary duty as a father. In doing so, I failed you both, enabling his worst instincts while dismissing your achievements. The counseling I'm receiving here has forced me to confront these failures. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I recognize the harm we caused. Your mother and I are both in therapy now, trying to understand how we became people capable of hurting our daughter this way." Similar letters arrived from my mother and, eventually, Jackson, each expressing remorse and acknowledging responsibility. Jackson's letter explained his diagnosis of intermittent explosive disorder and antisocial personality traits, conditions my parents had suspected but never addressed, preferring to cover up problems rather than seek treatment. "I'm not offering my diagnosis as an excuse," Jackson wrote, "but for the first time, I'm getting help for problems I've had since childhood. I don't expect to have a place in your life again, but I wanted you to know I'm finally facing the truth about myself." These communications stirred complicated emotions. Part of me remained wary, seeing potential manipulation in their sudden insights. Yet another part recognized genuine remorse, especially in my parents' case. After discussing it with my therapist, I decided to respond with brief, factual updates about my rebuilding efforts without committing to reconciliation. The day before the grand reopening, my mother called, her voice hesitant. "We saw the article about tomorrow's opening in the paper," she said. "Your father and I were so proud of what you've accomplished, Adrian. We know we can't be there, and we understand why. But we wanted you to know we're thinking of you." I thanked her politely, but maintained emotional distance. Trust, once shattered, couldn't be reconstructed with words alone. If reconciliation ever happened, it would require years of consistent actions demonstrating genuine change. Now, cutting the ribbon on opening day, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride in what I'd rebuilt, gratitude for the community that supported me, and a bittersweet awareness of the family absence. The journey had taught me painful but valuable lessons about resilience, boundaries, and the true meaning of support. Inside, Sweet Resilience buzzed with activity. The expanded kitchen accommodated 6 bakers, all working with new equipment that made production more efficient without sacrificing quality. The cafe area, designed with comfortable seating and warm lighting, encouraged customers to linger. A special display case featured Resilience cookies, with proceeds benefiting the foundation. Most meaningful was the memory wall near the entrance, displaying photos of the original bakery alongside newspaper clippings about the fire, trial, and rebuilding process. Rather than hiding my journey, I chose to incorporate it into the bakery's identity, transforming trauma into a story of overcoming adversity. Walter Simmons, now a treasured friend and foundation board member, approached as I greeted customers. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said, gesturing around the bustling space, not just of the bakery, but of how you handled everything with grace and determination. "I couldn't have done it without support," I acknowledged. "You, Tara, all these customers who believed in me when others didn't." "True strength isn't about standing alone," Walter replied. "It's about knowing when to accept help and when to set boundaries. You've mastered both." 6 months after reopening, I received notification that Jackson had completed his sentence and mandated treatment program. His therapist requested a supervised family session as part of his reintegration plan. After considerable deliberation, I agreed to a single meeting, with all family members present, held in my therapist's office, with clear boundaries established. The reunion proved awkward but important. My parents, visibly aged by their experiences, expressed genuine remorse without expectations. Jackson, sober and medicated, spoke about his ongoing treatment and his plans to move to another state for a fresh start away from old triggers. I shared limited information about my life and business without inviting deeper connection. "I don't know if we can ever be a traditional family again," I told them honestly. "Too much has happened. But I'm willing to consider very small steps forward if your actions consistently match your words over time." That meeting established a new paradigm: occasional phone calls, carefully neutral holiday cards, and a shared understanding that trust would require years to rebuild, if ever. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but a cautious acknowledgement that people can change if motivated to do the hard work required. As Sweet Resilience celebrated its first anniversary, I reflected on everything the past 2 years had taught me. I had learned the painful difference between genuine support and entitled expectations disguised as family loyalty. I discovered my own strength in navigating both devastating loss and public scrutiny. Most importantly, I'd built a new community of chosen family among friends, employees, and customers who celebrated my success rather than attempting to claim it. The foundation had helped 12 small businesses recover from disasters in its first year. Each success story reinforced my belief that resilience wasn't just about personal recovery, but about creating systems to help others navigate their own crises. One quiet evening after closing, I sat in the empty cafe with a cup of tea, surveying everything I'd built from the ashes of destruction. The path had been unimaginably difficult, but I wouldn't change the person I'd become through walking it. I had learned to protect what I'd built, while still finding capacity for conditional forgiveness. I had discovered that true community often emerges most powerfully in moments of crisis. Most importantly, I had proven to myself that no fire, literal or metaphorical, could permanently destroy what I was capable of creating. What would you do if someone tried to take what you've rightfully earned? Would you fight back like I did, or would you handle it differently? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need encouragement during a difficult time. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it inspires you to stand firm when facing your own challenges. Remember, your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it, it's proven by your resilience when tested.